Okay, so how your conditions affect you. So this is the main hub of the form, the main part of the form that we are mostly concerned about today. So what we're looking at here is, first of all, physical health problems. Secondly, mental health, cognitive and intellectual problems. So, mental health is about your mood and how mood and behavior might be linked. For example, it could be that you have severe depression, those kind of things. Cognitive is more about your ability to process information and what you're able to do in terms of thinking, learning, understanding, or remembering things. Uh, and part three is about eating and drinking. Okay, and some of these things kind of cross over a little bit, and you will find that quite often you are repeating yourself as you go through this form. But it is important that you repeat yourself, and what you have to do is make sure that there is consistency between all your answers. So you must make sure that if you've said something about your physical ability, that you're likely to have falls in section 1, then if there is something cognitively that impacts your ability to balance and make decisions in terms of safety, which could lead to you falling, that you're putting that information in there as well, and that it's got that consistency all the way through. Okay, so we'll go into that a little bit more as we go. So physical functions, first of all, it says only answer yes to the following questions if you can do the activity safely to an acceptable standard as often as you need to and in a reasonable length of time. So this as often as you need to is a really important thing, as well as safely. As I say, we're thinking about safety and we're thinking about an acceptable standard. Okay. A reasonable length of time is also important, but a reasonable length of time is something that's a little bit more vague and arguable. However, this in its entirety exists as an instruction because as the result of multiple court cases where the DWP had a very different point of view on what might be considered to be safety to any other reasonable person, and the court then directed them to change the assessment to match, which of course they did, sort of. So the first one is of course about moving around and using steps. So by moving we mean including the use of aids you usually use, such as a manual wheelchair, crutches or walking stick, but without the help of another person. So this must include using things like a wheelchair. So if you're in a wheelchair and the question is, can you go up and down steps? The answer would be no. If, however, you are using crutches or a walking stick, it might be sometimes, or it varies, something like that. So please tick this box if you can move around and use steps without difficulty. So, for example, for me, there's no tick in that box. I can't do that. How far can you move safely and repeatedly on level ground without needing to stop? So this is really important. They use the example here of tiredness, pain, breathlessness, or lack of balance. That's really important. At what point do you stop and need to rest? So for a lot of people, you might think, well, I can walk, from here to the shop, which is maybe 200 meters or more, but in real terms, you're actually only walking 50 meters until you stop and have a rest. Even if it's a short rest, it's really important that you record that accurately. And then you need to tell them how far you can move and why you might have to stop, what happens when you use a walking stick, crutches, wheelchair, or anything else to help you, and how it affects the way you move around. So, for example, I use a walking stick quite a lot. Sometimes I trip on it, That's important. It also causes damage to my wrist and my elbow over time, and I get a lot of pain and discomfort from using that. Sometimes I have to stop because of the pain in my arm, more than the pain in my legs, things like that. So all of those things are important. Don't tick it varies unless it really does vary quite a bit. Ticking it varies is something that you should do, but if you are more often than not in the position of walking less than 50 meters, then personally I would tick 50 meters as being genuine. If it's a case of it does vary quite a bit, then make sure that you tick it varies and that you are making that clear. Now, on the handwritten form, you could tick both boxes. So you could tick 50 and 100, and it varies, and say it varies between 50 and 100 meters, and be very specific about the variation that's occurring within it, and what type of day you might be able to do 100 meters, and what type of day you'd be having to only be able to do 50 meters. Again, continue on a separate sheet of paper if necessary. If you can get your answer into this box as it is, then that's absolutely fine. If you are talking about days when you are performing a little better than other days, then refer to them as better days, not good days. That's really important as well. So for me that would be 50 meters, and I would be saying I have to stop frequently due to pain and fatigue. Often pain is so great I cannot continue. I need to sit down when this occurs, as I may fall. Often I will get spasms in my legs and hips, which also mean I have to stop and cannot walk, or that I may fall over. I move best with support from another person, but I also use a wheelchair, mobility scooter, or car for longer distances. When I was young, I used to get quite grumpy about people who would just pop to the shop in the car, and I think, why don't you bloody walk? But now, if I need to go to the shop, I'm going in the car. So it is what it is. So yeah, that's the sort of language that you need to be using. It needs to be very dry, very clear. No emotion in there at all. You don't want to be kind of like, I find it so upsetting that I've got to fill out this form, or every time you don't need to put it like that. Just the facts. Just the facts. Going up or down 2 steps. Now, this is where the form starts to get weird. If you've not come across it before, you will know about the weirdness in this form, in that it asks you, are you able to do things that are extremely easy by anybody's estimation, and also don't really have a bearing on whether or not you're fit to work. That's been decided by a health professional already. Even if you can go up and down 2 steps, it does not mean you are fit to work. So that's really important to bear in mind with this. But can you go up or down 2 steps without the help of another person if there's a rail to hold onto? So I would personally be putting no for me, or it varies, and I'd be ticking both boxes if I was filling out the form. There are many occasions where I am not well enough to go up and down any steps, and I am likely to trip and fall if I were to do so. The frequency of this is 5 out of 7 days per week. So what I'm doing here is I'm making sure that the frequency of which this condition affects me is made very clear, in that when I put it varies, so that it's understood the level of variation that there is, and how and why. So physical functions, standing and sitting, only answer yes to the following questions if you can do the activity safely to an acceptable standard, as often as you need to, and in a reasonable length of time.